Hello, my name is Gamal Carvalho, and welcome to the Natick is United Racial Justice Panel Being Black in Natick. I'm one of the co-coordinators for Natick is United, and I'm happy to introduce one of our board members, Melissa Patrick, who will be facilitating this dialogue today. Melissa?
Thank you, Gamal. Welcome, everybody, for coming and joining our panel this evening called Being Black in Natick, Our Diverse Black Experiences. This is a wonderful opportunity to sort of build upon the message that Reverend Dr. Gregory Groover shared in today's Natick MLK event, where he said in his wonderful keynote speech that really what we need to do is to get to know each other better. And so hopefully this panel speaks to that and will help, is a step in that direction. So I put out the call and these wonderful Natick neighbors stepped up, and we're going to just kind of talk tonight. I do want to say I've got two hats on. I am the facilitator tonight. I'm also a Black resident and have my own experience. So from time to time, I will share my experiences as well, being a Natick resident. However, we have four wonderful residents here who self-identify as Black and living in Natick. So without further ado, I am going to have them introduce. We've got a series of questions, and so I'm
just
gonna.
before, sorry,
Yes,
Melissa, just
Gamal.
before you get
That's
into
all right.
I just want to remind those of you attending today that if you would like to ask a question of the panelists, that you need to
Yes.
open the Q&A box. The chat has been disabled just so that we can have a conversation here and not have side conversations in the chat. But we would love to hear questions that you have along the way in the Q&A. So make sure to open that up. It'll be at the bottom of your screen.
Thanks, Gamal. You would think we have done this, you and I together enough times. You'd think we'd have this down by now, but no, we will get it down. But I would like to first ask if somebody would like to begin first. Like I said, we have a series of questions, and the first question is, what brought you to Natick and how long have you lived here? So I can open up that question to the group and first ask who would like to begin.
Jump in.
Okay, Kristen.
Thank you, Gamal and Melissa, for facilitating, curating this conversation. I'm excited for us to share our diverse Black experience in Natick with our neighbors. My name is Kristen Pope. I'm a journalist as well as a digital content multimedia strategist. My husband and I moved to Natick in June of 2017. So it was about 3.5 years ago, I think now. And we were moving from after living in South Boston for about 18 months. We had moved from New York in 2015 to the area, to the region. And we were, I was expecting, and we were looking first and foremost for the best schools. You know, where could we get the best schools, the best combination of schools, decent commute into the city, and a home for under $1 million. And so we landed on Natick to kind of fulfill all of those boxes.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Kristen. And who would like to follow?
I can follow that. Hi, everyone. My name is Salimata, and I am originally from Mali, but I grew up in Flint, Michigan. So Flint is where I consider home in addition to Natick. I moved here in 2012 from Worcester. This was, I went to college in New York. After New York City, getting my bachelor's, I moved back to Mali for 3 years. And so while I was in Mali, my husband and I got married. And then at the time he was going to medical school in Worcester. And so at the UMass Medical School. And so I moved back here with him. And I started school in Boston at the Boston School of Public Health. And we needed a halfway distance, something that was really fair for both of us, commuting in directions, because I spent a year commuting and we had just had a baby. And so we landed on Natick, and, lo and behold, we moved here, and my in-laws also moved here. They ended up buying a house right here in Natick. And so we've been here since then, and it's been a really, it's been a nice experience thus far. So that's just a little bit about me.
Thank you, Sally.
Okay, I jump in.
Yes.
Okay, my name is Adizoku. I'm from the Ivory Coast. So I came here straight from the Ivory Coast. And what brought me here, it's family. We used to live in my country together. My wife is a former Peace Corps volunteer. So we were there, and there were some political troubles in the country. So she left, and I waited for her there for a year. And since she couldn't come back, the problems were still there. So I had to join her here. So why Natick? Her family lives in Framingham. She grew up there. And she had a sister here in Natick. And we used to come over for vacation for about 5-6 years here in the US. So we knew the place. And in addition, we had a 3-year-old girl back then. And we found a house next to an elementary school. So it was perfect, staying here next to the school, next to her sister, and next to her family. So that's why how we ended up here in Natick.
Thank you, Zadi.
Hi, my name is Bob Awkward, and I want to thank Gamel and Melissa as well, and the organization for bringing us all together. And my story is actually pretty similar to Kristen and Salamate. I mean, I think, as I heard you telling your stories, at the time we came to Natick, I was working in Lowell. My wife was working in Braintree, and we were trying to find some place that was midway for both of us, so neither one would have too long a commute. At the time, I was living in Newton, so we looked at Newton. That was just too expensive at the time. It probably still is. And so you flip to the other side of 128. Well, that takes you to Wellesley. That was definitely too expensive. And so one more town over, takes you to Natick. And it's like, oh, okay, here's a nice town, and it's affordable. At least at that time, it was affordable. It was midway between both the locations, and at least reputationally, it was seen as a good town for families. That was kind of, I think it still kind of is their mantra, that it's a good place to bring up your family, and great location in terms of 128, Route 9, Pike, 495. It's like, it seems, well, what's located was perfectly located for where we lived and worked. So, and it was affordable. So we said, let's check it out. And that was 30 plus years ago. We made that move. So the town and its reputation have held up, and that's why we've stayed here.
Thank you, Bob. Just to let the viewing audience or listening audience know that the 6 of us met a couple days ago. We don't all know each other from before this panel. And so we kind of agreed on what we call each other. So that's why I'm calling Robert Bob. And I know Sally for several years now. So we're on first name basis. And you can see that the reasons why we chosen to move to Natick: family, job, convenience, the school system. And my reasons for moving here, I've been here since 2004, are very much similar to the rest of you. At the time, my family was starting to grow. I had 2 children, and definitely it was an affordable location, wanting to stay in the area, and really felt as though Natick was a more friendlier, certainly economically diverse, and even ethnically, racially, just felt more comfortable here. I had actually moved here from Wellesley because my then partner and I were living in a multifamily apartment in Wellesley and never felt comfortable in Wellesley. So I knew that I didn't want to stay in Wellesley. So he was white and I am not. And definitely just, it's amazing how just a couple miles up the road can make a big difference,
Mhm. Mhm.
a big difference for me. So some of you out there listening, watching, might relate to some of the reasons why you are here in Natick, if you were not born and raised in Natick. And maybe you can, even if you were born and raised in Natick, and why you're still here in Natick. So moving on to the next question, what have you enjoyed most about living here in Natick?
Okay, I start.
Sure, thanks, Adi. Yes.
Okay, what I like the most here in Natick, the first thing is my neighborhood.
Mhm.
My neighborhood. I live in a very special neighborhood. It's very diverse. We have Chinese American, we have Korean Americans, we have I don't know, many people from many countries, including me. So it's very good to have this kind of neighbors, but also it's a place where there were a lot of kids, a daughter's age, when we came here in 2005. So she had a good environment and good friends around, going to school right next door. So that was good. And but what I appreciated more was my neighbors. And you don't know how that can make people feel when they come from another country. Let me tell you a short story about them. When I had my first lawnmower, it's one neighbor who just came to me and set it up for me and showed me how to operate a lawnmower because I've never done that in my life before. And when winter came, I came out, there was a big snowstorm. I went out with a fancy leather jacket and see things like that to shovel. And another neighbor came and said, no, 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 this is not how it works here. So he showed me how to shovel without breaking my back. So that was, it's a very good neighborhood. And I love this ambience. And the last thing that I love about Natick that I enjoy the most was the unique history of the town. Unique history. Yeah, when I learned about the history of Natick, I was amazed that nobody did something about it. There were a lot of books, but I felt that the story was not very well known. Very unique, very special, and it's a story that I keep learning. Yeah.
Thank you. I love those stories. Thank you. Yeah. Who'd like to
Well,
go next?
I'll jump in.
Great.
So what do I like most about Natick? Well, as I said, the reputation is held up. It is, in fact, has been a great town to raise our kids. We had two kids, and we raised them both in the town. It really was a good place for kids to grow up here. The summer program, Wood Trail, which is a high quality, moderately priced summer program that was fabulous. The sports programs, the recreation parks has a very active amount of programs. So those things were really, really good. Um, one of the things I personally have enjoyed about the town, in part because it reflects who I am, is that the citizens in the town are very involved and active and engaged in the governance of the town. So I've participated in lots of those activities, be it town meeting or um, in my own neighborhood or the Natick Democratic Town Committee or the Registrar of Voters, that there is as much activity or as little activity as you want. If you want it, there's plenty of stuff to get involved in. And I like that. I like being in a town where the people in the town are actively engaged and involved in their town. So it's, it's not just some professional manager running the place. The people in the town are actively involved with the town and the schools. And I think that's a very healthy thing. The town services are very good in general. The town's clean. It's relatively well run. Can't say that about every town and city. and I would say we've actually lived in so much we've enjoyed living here. We've lived in 3 different homes in Natick, and each one, it was a different neighborhood that we were part of. But I would have to say each neighborhood that we were in, the people in those neighborhoods, they were not especially diverse. There was some diversity, but not a lot of diversity, which is just the reality of the town of Natick. But the people were excellent. The neighbors were wonderful. And each of the neighborhoods we have been in, including my current neighborhood, where people know each other, people talk to each other, people look out for each other in the neighborhoods. It's kind of like that old fashioned idea of, who your neighbors are. Every neighborhood we've lived in, we all knew who each other was in our neighborhoods. We didn't have anybody, strangers coming in and going, no one knew who they were. And I thought that's a good thing. I mean, in the neighborhood that you could feel comfortable, your kids can go out and play in the street because you know who's out, not in the street, but in their yard, because you know who's around and you know who's in the neighborhood. So I'd say all of those things contributed to creating a quality experience for me and my family here in Natick.
Thank you.
I don't want to be repetitive, but I definitely share Zadie and Bob's experiences in that what I've enjoyed most has been getting to know our neighbors. We live on a block where most people have been on this street for 20 or 30 years. And so there's an establishment here, and I wouldn't say good or bad, there's pros and cons to that, but there's an establishment here where people take pride in this block. There kind of feels like a guard. So for instance, we did go away over the weekend and I let my neighbors know, and all of them says, okay, well, look out. One of them texts me and says, it's pouring rain. We're going to get all your mail. We're bringing it into your house. When I would say maybe a year or so ago, when Lily was about 2.5, when we would walk up and down the street, she'd go to every single door, and she'd knock on every single door, and everybody would open it, and she would walk right in. No ask, nothing. She would just walk right in. And so she actually helped me to get to know our neighbors better, because she would just stop at every single door and walk in everybody's house. And so that it helped us to realize that we have Indian neighbors to the left of us. We have Asian neighbors diagonally across the street. We, members of the LGBT community are here. We have Black people who are, further down the street, and it let us know who our neighbors are and the company that we reside in. But I agree with Bob, everyone looks out for one another, and everyone kind of feels like they're invested, not just because you bought a house here, but that you're invested on this block, we share it. Mm-hmm. And we are governing for each other. So definitely getting to know my neighbors on my block and beyond, just in this neighborhood alone, has definitely been the highlight of living here.
Thanks, Kristen.
I would say, I would echo what everybody said, really. I mean, growing up in Flint, Michigan, where, you really have that like small town feel, and then moving to New York City where you don't have that. And then moving to Mali where like everybody is in your face nonstop. And then back here again, I'd say that was one of the things that really kept us here. Like getting to having neighbors that you knew had your back. Like Kristen was saying, if you were traveling or, you needed to be away, like your neighbors could look out for you. I have actually a story about that. When we lived in a first house that we lived in Natick, we were renting. And we ended up having the landlord refused to renew the lease for us. And I had a newborn baby. And so we had to basically move out in, in a matter of months. And we had scheduled a vacation in California. And when I was in California, I'd applied to the Natick Mills, housing at the Natick Mills, and I wasn't able to go view it. I actually called one of my neighbors, Katie Jackson, right on Bay State Road, Bay State Street. She went to look at that house for us. She went to look at the apartment and she took pictures of it and she called me to tell me, Sally, like, I know you're moving from this 4-bedroom house to this 2-bedroom house, but if there's anywhere else that, if this is the best option because of, the high ceilings and, the large living room. So I wasn't going to be able to get anybody to do that for me, and, except for my neighbors. So they have my current neighbor here, the last snowstorm, I go outside ready to shovel, it's already done. And my driveway is completely clear. And so that is definitely an important aspect, a big aspect of life here in Natick. I love Tilly's. Tilly's is like, I mean, who doesn't love Tilly's? Tilly's is such an important part of Natick. I mean, you need anything, you can run to Tilly's and you can get it there. The family aspect of the community events that are hosted during the summer, farmers market, it's a family event. It's like a community picnic in a sense. You see the same families there, even if you don't live in the same neighborhood, you see the same people there with the same kids, and you end up getting to know them as well, expanding your immediate, neighbor. And so those are definitely things that I would echo.
Actually, if I could jump on that question, you just reminded me, you said that story that I can remember when we moved to our current neighborhood where we are now in South Natick. We had left the neighborhood where, again, we had known everybody knew us, et cetera. And so as we moved here, it was like, I was concerned, like, I don't know, is it going to be okay? And my wife would say, hey, consciousness is. So, wherever we go, we're going to have good neighbors. Don't worry about it. So the day we moved in, I remember I got here, the moving trucks pulled up. I go out, open them up. They're bringing the stuff in. All of a sudden, this guy comes loping across the yard from next door with no shoes on. He comes loping over with a 6-pack of beer in his hand. He comes over and he says, hey, I'm Bill. Welcome to the neighborhood. I said, whoa, okay, I'm Bob. He pulls off a beer off his 6-pack, gives it to me. He says, here, have one of these. Why you like, wow. that was my entree to the neighborhood. And then from that, over the next several days, so we had another neighbor brought over a plate of cookies and another neighbor brought a plant over. I thought, oh my goodness, what kind of neighborhood we're living in here? How wonderful is this? Like, really? There are neighbors like this still, huh? And it's been that way ever since.
That's a great story. Thanks, Bob. I wanted to share one thing that I really enjoy about Natick is the artist community. When we first moved to Natick, I really enjoyed taking my kids to the open art studios, and we've got galleries, and that's an aspect that has not yet been mentioned in this conversation that I wanted to put out there. We've got we've got a couple stores that highlight artists' work and local artists, and I really like that aspect about living in Natick. And also the Natick Community Organic Farm. My kids did go to Wood Trail. All 3 of them went through Wood Trail, definitely very economical. Yes. And I remember my oldest, her first year at Wood Trail as a first grader, her goal was to be a counselor. So her first year, she already had goals for when she was in high school. She wanted to be a Wood Trail counselor. But my kids also, when they were younger, they were able to go to camp at the Natick Community Organic Farm. And that was so much fun. And I used to love to take my kids to see the babies in the springtime, the little piglets and the lambs and the calves. So that was really wonderful with our boots on and traipsing through the mud and seeing the goats nursing. That was so much fun. And the neighbors. As a single mom, I really came to rely on my neighbors, definitely. Whether it was, I can't get to the bus stop in time. Can you make sure? Can you be there to meet my kids? So that small town feel and the civic engagement is really an aspect of Natick that I enjoy. And there have been aspects that have been really difficult for me, which is part of the reason why I founded Natick Families of Color. So being a Black woman in Natick has been challenging, and it has been challenging because of experiences I've had with individuals throughout my navigating aspects of my kids' schooling, other parents of friends of my kids, PTO. So the next question that I have, and before I go to the next question, I thought this might be an opportune time to give a little bit of background as to how this panel came about. And I wanted to share that back in July, I think it was July, Kristen, Kristen and I were on the phone talking, and we were talking about how we really do like living in Natick. But things were hot. Things are still hot. And we were venting to each other, supporting each other, coming up with ideas in terms of what we can do, because we want to see Natick healthy. We want to see and believe in a strong Natick community. And that's where the idea of having a panel where diverse Black voices, Black people could come and just share with the Natick community as a whole. So Kristen and I came up with this idea. And from this idea, it's kind of expanded. So hopefully this is the first of several panels. So perhaps the next panel will have a bunch of Asian American Pacific Islander voices from the Natick community step forward and share. And who knows what the third panel will be. But that's kind of the origin of where this panel and series of panels idea came from. Kristen, I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
Other than just, I appreciate you and Gamel having this platform. One of the first things that I was introduced to in coming to Natick was I think it's the September Festival. And so we went
Natick
to the
Days.
festival that happened in September. And at the time, Lily was about 3 months old. And so we stopped at all the booths and grabbed all the pamphlets, and there were preschools out there and all sorts of things. And one of them was you, Melissa. And so that was how I first met you, and how I first came to know about Natick Families of Color. And that was so helpful. It was so helpful to come to a place where you're in the minority and know that there's a safe space, or someone has already thought about you. Someone's already thought about your experience and how to help your experience be the best it can be. So being able to talk through, like we said, and if I can go into the next question, I can kick this off, because one of the things that I think we talked about is, and Bob, you shared this, the thing we heard from outside of Natick before we actually got here, just while we were looking, was Natick is a great place to raise children. That should have been the tagline, right? If this is a great place to raise your children, it's a great place to have a family. And so when we moved to the block, I was 8.5, almost 9 months pregnant, and the block showered us with gifts. The neighbors showered us with gifts, teddy bears, clothes for our baby girl. They showered us with gifts before she even got here, before they really knew us. And so that was our entree into our neighborhood and onto the block, and it was beautiful. And when I went back to work, I put my child in the daycare system here in Natick. And that was about 6.5 months, first put her in daycare. And so at about 12 months, we were exploring putting Lily into another daycare because she had outaged the class and they really were not able to service her anymore. She was walking and she was being more physical where most of her classmates were still on their bellies or still sitting down. And so we started to ask questions like, can you put her into, a toddler room for a couple of hours a day? Can you do something more with her? Because what you're telling us is that she's beginning to get bored. They started to say things like she's pushing cribs around and, she was being more physical with things in the room. And it occurred to me, my child was bored. And so when I asked these questions, I got a, kickback that no, they were not able to do that. And so my husband and I begun to look for another daycare for her because we were like, we think that she's outaged this class. It's possible her needs won't be met anymore. And there's this gap from 12 months to 15 months. They wouldn't move her to this toddler room until 15 months. So we're like, what do we do with this 3 months in between? Are we just going to let her be here? I don't want for them to start saying that she's becoming a distraction or that she's becoming, too much to bear because she is just, because they're not languaging her properly. Because the correct language is, my child is bored. So we're starting to have challenges there. And then the straw that broke the camel's back was when I was in the classroom with Lily and one of the daycare providers was changing her diaper. And when she took her off of the changing table, she said, you have a butt like your mom or your grandma. And my mother had been at the school, I don't want to say maybe the week before she said that. She had been there on vacation. It was for Lily's first birthday. So she had been in town. She'd come to the school with me, dropped her off and everything. And because my child was in the room, I didn't respond the way I wanted to respond because there were children in the room. I left my child there and went out into the car and called my husband. And I was furious. I was furious and livid. And by the time I got off the phone with him, I was profusely crying because I was so hurt that this teacher who's with my child 8 hours a day was so careless that in one shot, she stereotyped and sexualized my 12-month-old child and had no awareness of it at all. And so then I went back into the school and I told the executive director what happened. And she kind of looked at me like she was so shocked, but didn't have any like recourse or anything. And so we then sat down, myself, the executive director, and the teacher, and I had to explain to that teacher what she did and why it was offensive. She didn't get it for the longest until I explained to her that, we all have customs, we all have heritage. And what you did was, how would you feel if I came to your home and took your heritage and your culture and disparaged it? And she said, I would be offended. And so I explained to her, I had to give them a history of the over-sexualization of Black women's bodies and just Black bodies through time. I had to sit down and have that conversation. And I always knew that as a brown person, just being honest, I was going to have to advocate for my daughter at some point in her life, and every parent should. That's just a parental duty. But I knew that as having a brown child, history says, the data says that at 12 years old, brown girls are seen as adults, not as children anymore. And so I just knew it at some point, I'm going to have to advocate for my child, but I did not know it would be at 12 months. And so we ended up taking Lily out of that school, and it has stayed with me, and it will always stay with me, because while that wasn't in the public school system, the mantra that was given to me when we moved here was that this was a great place to raise children. That's what was told to me over and over and over again. And while my child at 12 months didn't know what that meant and the implications of what she was saying, at 5 years old, if a teacher was careless with their words, if a teacher was unaware or said something stereotypic or said something, that was insensitive, she would then begin to know something about that. I don't hear that in my home. Something about that doesn't sit well with me. What does that mean? So part of the reason, Melissa, going back to even your first point, about doing this was, to make sure that Natick is the place it says it is for all families. That if this is a great place to raise your children, that it's a great place to raise children of all colors and all nationalities and all heritage, at every level, from infancy until, they go off to college.
Thank you. Thanks, Kristen. So the question again is, what's been the hardest part about living in Natick, or maybe an experience that has been one that will never leave you? Like you heard Kristen say. Share. Yes, Zadi.
Oh, Christian, in my country, we would say Yako. It's a word of compassion. Sally's laughing. You know.
Thank you.
In my case, I had a series of little experiences like that. But the one that I will never forget is, maybe it's my own interpretation, but I don't think so. It's my daughter, since she was very little, she took skating classes at the skating rink here. So I usually went there to get her after classes and things like that. And one day, I've been there, there was not a lot of people. And okay, I went there in a sports outfit. I just shaved. Otherwise, I have gray hair and beard and things like that. Maybe that's why, but when I went there, what I noticed was that many people left the rink, came out, took their belongings, put them on a safe place, went back to the rink as soon as I set foot there. So as I said, maybe it was a coincidence. Maybe they had the same idea at the same time, I don't know. But I remember that I got hurt, really hurt by this thing. And I used to be somebody who loved to talk to everybody and being nice to. But from that day, when I went to the rink, didn't speak to anybody. Just went there, get my girl, and go back home. So that was a very bad experience. I had another experience that is, it's bad, but it was funny also, because I knew the guy. He was a good friend of ours. And I met him one day in Home Depot. So I came to him with a big smile because I saw a friend, but I could see that he was afraid first. He was really afraid when he saw me. But afterward, he recognized me and we had to talk better. I noticed that, and later he told a friend of ours that I scared him. So I don't know how I can scare somebody with a big smile and with a right attitude. But that's how I found out, as somebody coming from outside the country, what many Black Americans here, men, what they experience. Yeah, because I don't think that I'm a scary guy. That's what I think. I don't think I'm a scary guy, but scare people just because you come to them. So from that day also, it was a lesson for me when I meet friends or some people I'm not really used to in public settings or somewhere, I got reserved a little bit and I wait for them to come to me. Because it was not a good feeling. And there were some little things like that. But beside that, I had also some very good experiences. Let's say much more than those experiences that I had, bad experiences. Mm-hmm. So, and I didn't want those experiences I didn't want them to shape all my behavior here in Natick towards one. So still, then it hurts now a little less because I know the country more. And I know that it's something I should have expected one day. Yeah, but I remember as if it was yesterday. I got really hurt that day.
Thank you. Thank you, Zadi, for sharing those stories.
I can share a few things that I experienced when I lived in an apartment complex in Natick. I saw an opportunity for people to create a sense of community because I moved from a very tight-knit neighborhood to an apartment complex. And I organized a few families and had their consent, and then decided to make a proposal to the administration about providing one of the rooms, empty room they use for storage, if that room could be outfitted into a community room for children to have a place to be children, because the lot was very close to the where the cars came through, and it really wasn't that safe for children to be running around that close to so much traffic. And the administrator was a lovely, lovely woman who I actually think very highly of. And she thought it was a great idea, but she said something that has stayed with me. And I think that will stay with me forever. And it was, she said, Sally, that's a really great idea, but we don't want too much community here. And I was like, I'm a very expressive person. I'm an open book. And I just went like, she said, no, that's not what I mean. I said, no, I know exactly what you mean. But thank you for giving me the opportunity to express what my thoughts were. And that was that. But all of the families that were involved were people of color. And this was me, asking for a place, not just for people of color, but for all children in the building to be able to gather and to really form a sense of community. But that type of community was not wanted there. It was not encouraged, and it was not acceptable. And it was very, very, very disappointing. It's like you have this amazing idea to bring people together, to create a bridge, to create a sense of community, and it's viewed as great idea, but we don't want that kind of community. We don't want all these people of color congregating. That's really what it meant at the end of the day. And that has really left, a foul taste in my mouth. The other experience that I was actually both good and it wasn't bad. It was just I think an opportunity for educating. When my daughter was in kindergarten, my children are biracial. My husband is a white man. And so my kids are mixed. And my daughter was going through a phase of, not a phase, they struggle with this. Biracial children are always, trying to figure out where do I fit in? Am I Black, am I white? And just add a little more complexity. I'm a practicing Muslim, my husband is Jewish. it's like, it's not complicated enough that it's just black and white. We got to throw in, Islam and Judaism and, on top of each other. And so my daughter was like, one day she comes home and she looks at me, she says, "Mommy, I want blonde hair, blue eyes, and white skin." It's like, oh, okay, well, how do you deal with that, right? So I handled it the best I could, and I called the school counselor who my daughter worked with, and I told her what my daughter says. And the school counselor just, kind of giggled. Well, it's just a phase. She'll get over it. And I was like, no, this is not a phase. This is her life. This is her trying to figure out where she fits in, her identity, and her own sense of self and self-worth. What resources do you have to support my daughter who's going through this process? How can you help us at school? Because what happens at home needs to be supported at school, and vice versa, in terms of reinforcement of self-esteem and all of those different types of things. And I was so disappointed that there was nothing. There was literally no sense of support. There was no sense of, oh, well, you know what? This is a new thing for us. Like, I've never experienced this, Salimata. I'm not familiar with it, but I will do some research. I will dig a little deeper, and I will get back to you with some resource. There was nothing. There was just like me to explain to her, this is a phase, and her telling me, in her expert opinion, this is a phase. She's just going through stuff, and she'll get over it. And she's now in the 4th grade, and she has not gotten over it. It's part of her reality, and they will always be part of her reality. But there was really no resources provided. I definitely educated the counselor in I'm always giving feedback. If you don't know that about me, it's like something happens, I'm like, okay, this is what I think, this is what I think you can do to improve it. But I think what I should have done was reach out to the principal, and I didn't do that. And by the time I thought about that, it was like, it was really just underwater, under the bridge, really. So yeah.
Thank you, Sally, for sharing those stories. I knew that this was going to be the challenging part for me, facilitating this panel. I have my own stories. I don't know, Bob, if you wanted to share.
Well, I was listening, and some of this may be because I've been in the town for 30 years, so I've lived over a broader time horizon, A, but B, I think more importantly, our kids did not go to public school in elementary and middle school. They came into the high school. Actually, my daughter came in to middle school, but my son only came into the schools at high school. So a lot of the kind of issues that it sounds like people had around their kids, I think we didn't necessarily have because our kids went to private schools. But I should say the reason they went to private schools is because when we talked to people in the town way back, 30 years ago, especially the few people of color in the town that we knew, the feedback we heard is that there were issues in the schools, that they weren't very open-minded. They weren't really very diverse. And again, this is going back some time, so I don't want to say that's today because I don't know. My kids have been out of schools for a long time now. So, but they weren't very open-minded. They were, it might not be the best experience, that your child might not be well accepted in the school system. So we thought, okay, well, we don't want our kids to start off with experience. It's already enough that they're already Black living in American, living in Natick. We want them to at least start in an educational experience where they will be accepted for who they are, and that they will get the foundations they need. And most importantly, that love of learning will be encouraged early on in them so that they become lifelong learners, which quite frankly, even though it cost us an arm and a leg, it did work out that way. Now, of course, I don't want to make it sound like private schools are some Pollyanna I mean, they trust me, they got a lot of issues in those private schools. And as Kristen said, as a parent, you got to be on it. You got to be on it no matter what, but especially when you have a kid of color, even in the private schools, you got to be on those folks, because they got issues. And so we certainly had to do that. But I think the other thing to help our kids in Natick is because our kids, although they went to private school, because they went to Wood Trail in the summer, both of our kids were involved in town intramural sports. I think my daughter did um, softball, basketball. My son did soccer and basketball. So they were connected with kids in the town. So that really helped them. They were seen as part of the town community. And I say that only because the one thing I do recall hearing from both of my kids is that the children from Metco who are in Natick absolutely have a very different experience, because the kids know that they're not in Natick and they treat them differently. They have far more challenges in the schools. They act towards them differently. And I think to a large extent, I can't say completely, this is really my kids' lived experiences. They would have to really talk about this, what happened, their experiences. But I think because they had all those neighbor connections, they were seen as town kids. So people didn't necessarily treat them that same way because they all knew them. They'd known them for years. Actually, my daughter did, what do you call it, brownies and brownies, daisies and brownies and Girl Scouts in Natick. So, they had a lot of connections with a lot of the kids. A lot of those relationships, literally, I mean, I think my daughter has some relationships from those early days she still maintains today from those early days. So, they've known each other for a long time. So, so I think thankfully, maybe because of the private school experience, we may have missed some of those experiences the kids would have in the school system. I speak about myself personally. I can't tell you I've had an experience where I really felt singled out as a person of color in the town, me, Bob, personally. I've had an issue in Wellesley, but not in the town of Natick. Since we're talking about the town of Natick, I can't say that I can really recall a specific issue where I really felt, man, I got the short end of the stick here. And I think there's no other way I could explain that than other than my color. I can't really say I've had that experience in Natick, although I am sure, because we're living in Natick and Natick is in America, and we know that racism alive and well in America. So we know those issues are certainly here in the town. But my sense is, in the time I've lived in the town, that there are lots of people goodwill who are trying to do the right thing in this town and are very open to learn. I mean, look at the number of people who are on this, watching this and watching this webinar. I think it speaks to the fact that people are open to learn and listen. I do recall there was one issue. I remember a few years ago, there was some issues, I think, with some skinhead issues going on in town, or some folks were really starting to act out. And one of the Natick parent group or something kind of reacted to it, and they pulled together and started having sessions and say, we're not going to have that kind of stuff here in our town. And I thought, well, those folks are everywhere. I mean, they are everywhere. But I thought, I'm glad to see folks in the town react to that and say, no, we don't want that here in our town. So my personal experience has been, the challenges have been more ones of ignorance than people just being outright knuckleheads. And so, and I think, if people are ignorant, then if they're open, then they can learn, then be educated. And all of that will help to make a much better community.
Thank you so much. I just wanted to add here, so I'm monitoring the Q&A in this meeting, but also I'm monitoring the comments on our Facebook live stream. I just wanted to, reflect back to you all the gratitude that everyone is having for all of the stories that you're sharing, and that they're really learning from that. And there's a lot of comments here about the schools needing help with diversity, particularly, concerns regarding biracial children. And there's a lot of feedback here, just again, gratitude for the sharing of the stories, and a lot of similar stories that a lot of our attendees have also experienced. And so I wanted to mirror that for you all, since you're not necessarily looking at those.
I'm gonna thank you, Gamel, for that. Yeah, so I'm looking at the participants number here in this Zoom room, and there's about 77. And as Gamel reminded us, it's being live streamed on Facebook. So there's even more than 77 people who are listening and viewing. Um, and and yes, thank you for your authentic and vulnerable sharing. And I'm looking at the questions and the questions that are coming in. First of all, there was a question specifically about should biracial children be considered Black? And I will answer that as a mixed race self-identified Black woman who is very light-skinned and oftentimes mistaken for, well, what are you? You know, and when, depending on my mood, if I don't like say something sassy and snarky, because what kind of question is, what are you? I'm a human being. Um, um, I think it's important, and I share this with you as you know, a trained social worker and somebody who, as my full-time job, I work with educators and other people around racial identity issues. It's important that mixed race kids are free to self-identify, and it's very, very normal and natural for mixed race kids to experiment with how they self-identify, and it's very natural for them to self-identify differently than siblings and parents, and that it's important to give them the space to do that. And in so doing doesn't necessarily mean that they're having quote unquote identity issues. It means that they're just kind of, you know, figuring out what feels right to them. They can still have a, you know, a solid identity. And also sometimes situationally, it makes a big difference. So that's one thing that I just wanted to put out there. So if you have a mixed race child, niece, nephew, grandchild, and they identify as biracial or Black or whatever the mixture is, just support them in how they self-identify is my message. And in terms of situations with the school, so I do have 3 kids and their father is white. So they really do pass as white. However, depending on who they're with, and they don't always, their identity does get questioned in terms of, well, what are you? And people can't necessarily put them in a box. For, you know, 2 of my kids' identities are questioned like that. And so what I wanted to say for one of my kids whose identity is a little bit questioned, I have found as a parent, you know, in kindergarten, I had to really advocate for my daughter, who did a pretty darn good job in kindergarten reading at home and knowing her letters. And then the kindergarten teacher evaluating her and assessing her far below her reading level. And am I having to go into school and advocating for her and saying, you know, if you put this to a song, she'll get it. And still my daughter scored low on the reading assessment. And I know it's because my daughter didn't feel comfortable, because my daughter didn't feel safe with this teacher. And so, you know, I tried to communicate with the teacher. Now, whether the teacher didn't hear me because for whatever reason, I'm not sure, but in the back of my head, I'm thinking, is she not listening to me because she can't stop staring at my hair? What, you know, what is it about me? So there's always that little question in the back of my head. What is it about? Because Zadi, like you, I'm a nice person. I'm friendly. You know, I can connect to people. What is it? You know, so there's always the little question in the back of my head, or the time at the end of this school year party, and all the kids got invited to the family, to the classes get parent, what's the term? in elementary school, there's always a class parent or two class parents.
Mhm.
And at the end of the school year, there's a party at one of the class parents' house. Well, ironically, my kid and I were the only ones not invited.
Oh.
The only reason I knew about it is because another parent noticed I wasn't on the invite list. So of course I brought my daughter anyhow, because she would have been mortified to go to school the next day and find out there was a party that she would, so, and again, in the back of my head, I'm like, what is going on here? So I have to question. There are still parents that I will see at Super Stop and Shop or around town who I have known for 18 years. And I don't know what it is about me. I'll still look at them thinking that maybe they'll catch my eye and smile, and they look right through me. I don't know if any of you can relate to that, like you're invisible interaction, but that's what it feels like. So this is a call in terms of what we can do to make Natick a little bit friendlier. It's okay to make eye contact. At least for me, it's okay.
Right.
It's okay. It's okay for me. I don't know about any of you. Is it okay for you?
And I know, Boston, kind of the Boston area has a little bit of that
I
stigma
was
with it that, people
about
don't
to jump in
see
and say
they
that.
see you. I'm not from Boston. I grew up in the Midwest where, we speak a bit more than my family moved down south. They speak a whole lot more and expect you to speak back.
Mhm.
And I can't say that and I hear you, Melissa, wholeheartedly, because it's like trauma. It is like the trauma, the PTSD that you live with as a person of color in this country, that you're trying to give the benefit of the doubt. You want to believe the best. But when things happen, I feel like that trauma rises up that says, is that the reason why?
Mhm.
And you don't want, I think it was Zadi said, you don't want to have your whole experience shaped, through the lens of race. I sit here and, I think I'm not going to speak for everyone, but I will say I love being a Black woman. I absolutely love being a Black woman. I glory every day in being a Black woman. There is nothing else that I want to be but a Black woman. And so, I thankfully don't have identity issues with that. But then there are times where you feel like you have to press forward in spite of that, or explain yourself in spite of that. And I haven't, I'm grateful to say I haven't had the experiences in Natick necessarily where I feel like people that I know or people that claim to know me have, made me feel invisible. But I've had it as a Black person where I know I'm like, I know I know them, I know that I think they know me, and yet this experience, this interaction we're having is diminishing. So I hear that.
Melissa, I want to speak a little bit to the question about whether Black biracial children should be considered as Black or white. I really thank you for your insight, because you know that so much more than I do. Like Kristen, I also love my Blackness. I mean, I am like obsessed with, I know, with just who I am. I'm very comfortable. I'm very happy. I just love myself. I love everything about myself. And I grew up in a culture where, being from Mali, there's, growing up in the majority Black community, both in Mali and in Flint, Michigan, you have Black people of different, skin tone, as you can see right here, looking at the screen. And, there's this idea of colorism, people bleaching their skin in order to be lighter skinned, because people prefer, they're not comfortable with how they look, and they think that they're more beautiful the lighter their skin color. I have family members who do this to themselves. And so I decided as a parent of biracial children that I'm going to raise my children and help them understand that no matter what identity you have for yourself, the world will always see you as Black. And so therefore you are a Black child. That doesn't mean that you're not free to identify yourself however you want to. If we lived in a community like, let's say, Flint, Michigan, for example, in a city like New York or Chicago, where they see people like themselves, like the beautiful color spectrum of Blackness and brown people, where they could, find a place within that. But we live in Native people, okay? When they go out, they don't see people that look like them. And so I do not want my children to be confused and think that they're white, because they're not. They're biracial. And the large majority of the world, we see them as Black. And so that's how I've chosen to express it to my children. So go ahead, Melissa.
I don't want to cut you off. I'll wait until you're done with your sentence.
And so I just wanted to express that, if we lived in a community where it was a lot more diverse, I think I would be a little more flexible. Not to say that I'm saying you are Black. No, that is not what I'm doing. I just want people to know that. But I think it's important, the way that I'm raising them, it's important for them to see how comfortable I am in my skin. And I want them, at the end of the day, they can consider themselves whatever they want. I just want them to love themselves for who they are and just be comfortable. And so, but thank you for sharing your experience as not only a person, biracial person, but also a social worker.
We can have a future panel about interracial families. I actually,
Yes.
we could do that. We could do that because on this panel alone, we have, at least I know, 3 families represented with mixed families represented with mixed race kids.
Mhm.
And I printed off some numbers from the Census Bureau. Yeah, I'm not going to get into that. You can look it up at the census.org. You can look it up. But but the question came up in our Q&A, so I wanted to address it. I want to get back on track to our beautiful Black diverse experience voices panel. And I also am looking at time. I'm mindful of time. So it's just after 8:10, and I want us to kind of start shifting towards a solutions-oriented frame of mind, because this is a Natick is United panel, and really in the spirit of Natick is United, we do want to think about how we can move towards that common purpose of creating more of a community, a healthier community, like we were talking about earlier, where we are an anti-racist community, where we're a community that's welcoming to all. What will help us get to that place? What are some ideas?
Can I just add as an additional layer there? I just want to appreciate that often when we have these conversations, a lot of the focus comes to the experiences of our kids, and you've shared some of that. And you've also shared some of your experiences as adults at the grocery store, you know what I mean, at the ice rink, these things. And so I would just ask, as you're talking about what can be done, to think about it from both perspectives. I think all of us as adults, we want to go right into fixing it for the kids. And I just want to make sure that we broaden the conversation to all generations, let's call it.
Well, Melissa, I think you kind of kicked off part of it by talking about this idea of having these kinds of forums, because I think, again, my experience is a big part of the challenge here is around ignorance. And I don't mean people are small-minded, ignorance in terms of not knowing. So how do you help people who don't know? You give them information. And like I invited some people to get on this call because they've specifically, in the whole post-George Floyd era, have asked me questions about how is it being Black living in America? So when we did this, I thought, I'm going to invite them to come to this because they can hear not just only me, but hear other people talk about this. Because I thought the good news is these are folks white folks who want to know. They're asking. So if people want to know, you need to educate people who want to know. That's a big piece of it. So I think doing these kinds of forums, I think, is a big step, especially one with younger people, kids, because I think they've got an experience we're not going to know unless they come to us and bring it to us. We're not going to necessarily know those experiences, but I think there's an experience going on there that would be useful to have shared. Another thing I think, because you were asking about how can we make things better, I would certainly encourage, for me, one of the most challenging parts about living in Natick is the fact that it is not a very diverse community, which I knew when I moved here. I'm not like, oh, wow, surprise. I knew that when I came here. So for people who want a diverse community, this will probably be a challenge. I mean, you're just not going to see a lot of brown folks in this town because there aren't a lot of brown folks in this town. So I think one of the things that's important to do for people, and I think it's one of the things that helped me in this town, is for people to get engaged and involved in the town. One, because the town encourages it. They welcome people's involvement. And two, I think it helps you is you get to know, because you get to know people in the town and people get to know you in the town. And I think that's a very important, and you get to help influence what happens in the town. So I would certainly say that would be a recommendation for people of color to do, I think, for people to get involved with that.
And I just piggyback there on what Bob was saying and just remind people that Natick has actually just launched and already has been meeting the Natick Equity Task Force specifically to envision what a possible future mechanism within the town government could be to address equity issues. I'm going to put the link to it in the chat here for the attendees, but you can go to the natickma.gov website and search for the Natick Equity Task Force there. And if there are things that people want to connect with the task force with, you could find contact information there.
I want to piggyback off of what Bob said and answer this question, Melissa, and also kind of go into this place that we're going into, solutions. One of the best experiences that I have had in Natick was running for town meeting. Last summer, I ran for town meeting and I met so many people, so many wonderful people. For me at the time, perfect strangers, but still Natick neighbors came and created campaign material for me. And they stood outside with me in the rain while we were at the polls on the day of voting. And, they were willing to take care of my children. They brought my family food when my husband was appointed to the finance committee. And they just continued to spur me on and to support and to help and to spread the word and to get their friends to the polls. It was absolutely one of the best experiences I've had in this town, because I had no idea that people would be so supportive and would galvanize in the way that they did. And I'm forever grateful for that. And I've made so many new friends and new Natick neighbors because of that experience. And so now both my husband and I, like, Bob said, we're both, now on town boards. And so it is helping us to not only get to know the town better, but of course, get to know our neighbors better. And like you said, Bob, have an influence on the future of this town and the shape of this town, and bring our ideas and our voice to the table. One of the things that I would say about solutions, however, is that if the census is, if I'm on the correct census, keeping in mind that Black people are 2% of the population in Natick, I have to say that Black people cannot be the only one. Like, there's so much work that has to be done. And, I'm just gonna be honest, Black people being able, living in the suburbs are building just like anybody else is doing. I don't come from old money. I don't come from old money. So it's important that I work that I'm working, that my husband and I are working, that we can afford childcare. And we have to provide for childcare to be on these evening personnel committee and finance board meetings. We have, because we don't live near family. So we have to create an ecosphere that we likely have to pay for in order to be at the table. So one of the things that I would say for a solution is for our majority neighbors to come ask your Black neighbors, what is it that we come engage us as well? because there is only so much work to do. I'm thankful and I'm appreciative for each one of our neighbors who are stepping up to the table to be on town meeting, the planning board, personnel board, finance committee, all of these committees, because there is far more work than we have the bandwidth to shoulder at this time, you know, and we do need to be at the table. If you're going to, you know, do equity work, please have a person of color at the table, persons of color, youth at the table. You know, it's important that, you know, while we absolutely have to be at the table informing the process, shouldering the burden of the entire process is not sustainable. And I need for my majority neighbors to understand that while we want to be at the table, we're going to be at the table. We know we have to get involved to know them, to affect change. At the same time, we've got to create sustainability, economic sustainability in our own families to then do that kind of work. So I hope that speaks to, you know, one, the best experience that I've ever had in Natick, but two, solutions for how we can continue to commune, interact, intersect, and influence and impact change together.
Yeah, to your point, Kristen, that was beautifully said. Like, I could not have said it the way you said it. But, you know, exactly to your point of neighbors, you know, really coming out to support. One of my best experiences in Natick is as a Black business owner. And somebody had a question about that. I don't know how many Black businesses there are in Natick. I can tell you, I don't know any of them personally. So that already tells you that there aren't that many. I am CEO of Dugu. Dugu is a West African fusion restaurant that used to be in Medfield. I looked for places in Natick. I could not find, I could not afford what was out here in Natick. I found something 2 towns over in Medfield, and I would be at the farmer's market. But the experience was that it was my Natick community that supported my business. It was not my Medfield, because they really were not my customer base. Like, I sold my food specifically at the Natick farmers market and Tilly's, as well as Tilly's. You know, that for me was a really big deal, because here is a family-owned company that's been around for over 75 years. You know, that is your absolute classic American, you know, food that they sell there, who decided to take on an African fusion restaurant and sell their food with the Tilly's tag on it. I mean, that is so significant. And it allowed my business to survive. It allowed my business to thrive. Unfortunately, as a result of the pandemic, I had to close my business. I had to close my restaurant in Medfield, not because of financial reasons, but because I have 3 small children. When schools close and daycares close, to be home instead of driving myself crazy while running a business for raising 3 children. But that has been such a phenomenal experience, and it's allowed my business to even continue to survive, even though we're struggling, as is every other business because of the pandemic. My business is still around, and I've been able to pivot and focus my energy into providing locally handcrafted ginger-based drinks that you can find at the farmers market. And as soon as our production kicks up, Tilly's is ready to carry our juices for us. So that's a really big deal. So I think that's a solution that's already happening right now. And thank you to all of the entire Native community who has come out to support my business at the farmers market, because you know what? Most of the time, I'm the only person of color. I'm the only Black woman there at the farmers market selling African food in Native for the, it's it's not easy to do that, but people have been so supportive and the Native community has really shown up. And so I encourage you all to continue to do that, because you know what, it matters. Even though my business is not profitable, I know that it will get there with your support. Mm-hmm. So that is a solution that is currently happening. And so add to it, continue it, come to the farmers market, continue to support these small local businesses, because it really does matter. It does matter.
It's my turn. Okay. Let's say my best experience in Natick. it certainly is the premiere of my documentary on the history of Natick. Afterward, I made other documentaries, but not about Natick. But the one about Natick, I was kind of concerned before the premiere. It was in 2012, because I was not sure many people would show up with this funny name, and I'm just a non-guy. So, but I worked with the Natick Historical Society, and I was surprised when I saw that the library was packed. And not only that, people stay there from the beginning to the end, 1.5 hours, watching the whole documentary. And at the end, I was even more pleased when many people came to me and said, thanks for doing this movie. Thanks for teaching us the history of our own town. And from there, I felt like I earned, I felt like I belong now to the town because I contributed to the town and people recognize that. And so it was very fulfilling for myself. And I got a lot of invitation. I got to know a lot of people. And the consequence of all of this, because the movie is about race, the Native Americans, the African American slaves, people were not afraid of talking about race with me. Yeah, people were not. And I had a lot of debates about race, about my perspective as an African coming here. And as Robert said, there's a lot of ignorance. People don't know. Some people, honestly, they don't know. And when I first came, when I met people asking me some questions, sometimes I got mad. But after all those experiences, I said, no, don't get mad. Just have a conversation and trying to teach them something. Teach them what you know. So, and the other thing is this I learned from some friends here, but I learned also from the new documentary that I completed about the relationship between African Americans and African immigrants. I learned that people, most of the time, they're more comfortable talking about race with us African immigrants than with African Americans, because there's less tension. We don't have the same history. So they come to me and we speak honestly about race. And I finally get to be the defender of African Americans, because there's so many misconceptions and things. So I try to dispel the stereotypes about African Americans when I speak to those. Right? So just to say that we African immigrants, Sally, we African immigrants here, we can be a link in the town between African Americans here and white Americans. Yes, we can do that. And I'm always available for this kind of stuff. Anytime you need me, yeah, let me know.
Thank you, Zadi. Wow. I'm looking, we are at 8:27. We've had a flurry of questions coming in. The last one is a comment. Wonderful panel. Thank you all for sharing your positive, happy, sad, and challenging experiences in and around Natick. I am happy to be your neighbor. Thank you very much. And also thanks so much to the panel. I've learned a lot, and you are wonderful people. So thank you to those who have stayed with who've stayed with us throughout the who joined the panel to listen and learn. I'm
And
going
I just want to add, there's a lot of thank yous also on Facebook, and
Okay.
a question: what is Zadi's documentary called, and where can we view it?
Yeah, well, the idea came to me. I think it's time to have to show your documentary again.
Yes,
one?
yes.
I'll cater
think
the
we-
food. I got the food and the drinks. I'll take care of that.
Okay.
All right.
Yes, so we need to put that in the works to start planning it. Yeah, and I'm gonna put a plug in, Sally, for your ginger juice, because I was a tester, a taste tester, and her ginger juices are so good. So that was not planned or anything, but
Thank you, Melissa. I
yes,
appreciate
so
it.
it's
Yeah,
very
Tilly
good.
soon.
So
And I-
Zadi,
Okay,
share
good.
your documentary name, Zadi.
Yeah,
What's the
yeah.
name of the documentary?
What's the
Which one?
documentary?
Which one?
The one about Natick.
Okay. It's Praying Town.
Praying
Praying
Town.
Town. And
Yeah.
what about the one about the relationship between African Americans and Africans?
It's Black and Black.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Oh my gosh. More panels. Another question that did come in that we kind of did answer was from a white resident that asked what we would like from our white allies in terms of support. And, I'm going to answer, I would like my white allies and co-conspirators to not expect comfort. And to, Kristen, yes, if you look it up on census.org, we are 1.9% of the Natick population, so it's not on us. It is not on us.
Can I just say a few words, Melissa? I would say keep asking questions.
Mm-hmm.
Never think that it's been fixed, because today we celebrated MLK Day. I listened to the I Have a Dream speech. It's still happening today. So
Yeah.
keep always asking questions. Keep on asking those questions. That's what I would say to my white allies.
Yes.
I want to
Thank
echo Ayanna Presley, and Ayanna Presley has moved from allies to accomplices.
Mm.
I think it is so powerful because ally can almost, I think there's got to be this movement from ally to accomplice, because accomplice sounds like an action word. My ally can stand with me at a protest and still not stick their neck out. And I need for my accomplices to put their name and their neck on the line in order to stand up. So that's what I would like for my accomplices to do in Natick. And I know a number of them are. I actually have some phenomenal accomplices right here in Natick, and I'm so grateful for them.
Yes.
I don't want to call any names, but I do have some phenomenal accomplices here in Natick. And I also want to say to what you said, Melissa, we also, we want to do these panels again for certain. I thank you so much for curating this and having the courage to do this so that we can speak up. And I thank each and every person who has stayed on and asked questions and made comments and through the end. It speaks to hopefully the commitment that our town has to getting to know our neighbors and creating an environment that is welcoming to each and every person.
I know you're trying to wrap us here, Melissa, but if I could throw in a quick one, given the mission of Natick, your organization, United. And to me, when I think about United, I think about people coming together and, creating a sense of peace among the whole community. So I thought this is Dr. King's day. I thought it'd be one of the great quotes I love from Dr. King is that peace is not merely a distant goal we seek, but a means by which we arrive at that goal. So that means peace starts first within each of us. So by people coming as they have and being open and being educated and learning and being accomplices. I love that. That's just become part of my lexicon. That will allow each of us to lock arms and create this, take the piece that we each have and join together and create a better, stronger community for everyone.
Melissa, my thought came back to me. I was blanking on my thought earlier.
Oh, good.
I want us to also be mindful that what happened on January 6th at the Capitol resides here. And we saw that publicly. There are some private places where that's likely happening that we don't know about because it's private, but I don't want, when we say things like Natick is a great place to raise your family, it's a great place to raise kids, I don't want us to say that disconnected from the reality. That the macro resides in the micro. And that's why we're having to do this, because Natick is not a Pollyanna town separate from what is happening in our country. We are experiencing that right here. And so what I say to my accomplices is, let's be honest. Let's be honest about the reality that resides right here where we live.
And to that note, I'm going to end that what I would like from my white allies, accomplices, as well as my co-conspirators, because I've got some co-conspirators out there as well, is that you either begin or continue really to start talking about how white supremacy isn't about specific people, it's about a system that oppresses us all. And we have to start talking about it, because it'll make Natick a more united community if we can talk about how it impacts Natick residents in different ways. The adults as well as our youth. And on that note, I see Gamel's little square light up because she's about to formally end this. And again, thank you, panelists. You've been wonderful. Thank you for your time tonight.
Inviting us. Oh, long day.
Well, thank you.
It was a pleasure being with you all.
Thank you.
And on behalf of Natick is United and as a Natick resident, just thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Thank you to our panelists. Thank you, Melissa, for facilitating this conversation. And thank you to our attendees, both here in the meeting and on Facebook Live. I really appreciate it. I really appreciate there have been 52 comments so far on the Facebook Live as we've been talking. So you've really engaged a conversation with the town. And thank you so much.
Thank you.
Sure.